you cannot even remotely pretend that there is some kind of equivalency between Joe Biden saying one thing that was regrettable and shouldn't have been said, and Donald Trump saying something every freaking day, multiple times a day, that demonizes, dehumanizes people for disagreeing with him, for not being people that he deems worthy of being in this country. You know, you cannot tell me that what Joe Biden said in his statement there even remotely stacks up to what that comedian said at that rally and other people. I'm sorry, you just can't do it.
Alrighty, welcome in. Another fantastic week to your favorite political podcast, Alabama Politics This Week, with Josh Moon and
David Person.
How are you, David?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Not too bad. I've recovered from a tiring weekend this weekend. It's fits in great with the regular opening of the show where we tell you about our friends at Wind Creek Entertainment, because we went down to another fantastic place that's owned by the Porch Creeks, the Porch Band of Creek Indians in this state, and that is OWA. I know you've never been because we talked about it last week. I had never been. Honestly, I'd never paid much attention to it outside of saying, no, we're not going there as we drove by on the way to the beach. We've got to get to the beach. We're not going to the amusement park on the side.
All right.
That was a mistake. We had a fantastic, they didn't ask me to say anything about this or anything else. I'm just telling you, man, that is a super, super nice place. It is, honestly, some of it is, they've got an indoor water park inside of this humongous facility there. It's kind of like a really clean and upscale Wolf Lodge type place, the people take their kids to at these other, these other little resort places around. Mm-hmm. It's inside of this, just this tremendous building. It's all made out of glass and stuff, and has a retractable roof and a retractable side door that they can open up. And it's got all these different slides, which they really ought to get an escalator up to some of those, because, man, old people, man, the legs don't work quite as, come on, man. I had to climb those stairs so many times with my little one to go and do those slides. But they've got giant TV. They had giant TVs playing football everywhere around the place. When I say giant TVs, I mean basically giant screens. They weren't really TVs. These were probably 200 inch TVs on the walls of this place. And then outside there is a giant movies type screen, movie theater type screen outside above the wave pool that they have out there. It's just a tremendous little beach area with the cabanas and the chairs all set up, the food service, and all this inside. And there's this little town that's there, and it kind of reminds you, it's kind of set up a lot like Bridge Street, with the water flowing through, and the little shops and restaurants. And we stayed at the hotel there on the property, and it was, I'll tell you how good it was. When we started to leave, my daughter was crying. That's always the test of, she was, but I'm going to miss OWA. And I was like, I said, you didn't even know what OWA was. Now you've had a great time. Let's don't cry about it. Let's just talk about how great it was. But it was, you should look into it. It was a really, really fun trip. We had a really good time. Everything was so clean and nice and well done and well put together. And I haven't even talked about the amusement park, the roller coasters, and those things that spin and make you sick. And and then they've got a whole section of kids rides too for the little ones, and we did all of those, and games and all sorts. It was great. It really was.
Well, I'm sold. I love a good water park. Now I'm not big on amusement parks and roller coasters and all that, but I love a good water park. Man.
They got one of those slides that you stand in, and they close the thing up, and then the floor drops out.
Ooh.
And you off you go.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they've also got the little racing. They've got a racing one there where you got the 3 tubes, and you can You can all hop in at the same time, and then boom, you're off, and then you see which one gets to the bottom first. And yeah, man, it really is. It was a great experience. Really nice place. Really well done. I would highly encourage anybody to do that, or to go to any of the Wind Creek entertainment spots if you're into more adult entertainment, and by that I don't mean naked people. I mean gambling. And so, I mean, normally when you say adult entertainment,
well, true, that's true.
That's true. I just want to be clear that I'm drawing the line there. We're just talking about gambling, okay? That's all we're talking about. Gambling, nice restaurants, and a spa. And so, if you want to go and do that, look them up online at Wind Creek Entertainment. You won't be disappointed. All right. I am disappointed though. Not in those folks. I am disappointed in a lot of people, and especially some of our friends in the media, and the way this last week apparently is going to be handled by a lot of folks, even in the more liberal media, and the double standard that continues to persist in this race and in any race that Donald Trump is in. Apparently, we're just going to continue to give him a pass on the horrible shit that comes out of that man's mouth on a daily basis, while we simultaneously hold everyone else to this higher standard of office that has always existed for most people when they're running for president. The perfect example came within the last 24 hours. We record on Wednesdays. We're back to recording on Wednesdays, I should say. We've got our current president, if you've forgotten, is Joe Biden, which, by the way, I was going to write this week that we've all forgotten that Joe Biden was basically the president, for the last several weeks, which is the way it used to be. You used to be there was a time in this country where people would go, "Hey, who's the president?" Oh yeah, the guy, and you wouldn't hear from the president for weeks on end. There would be every now and then he would pop on your screen in the middle of the week and interrupt your favorite shows, and you'd, oh my God, right in the middle of Roseanne? What, are you kidding me? Or whatever the hell. Cheers. Oh my God, it's preempted by the president. What? And that was the only time you ever heard from the dude. And it was always a dude, of course. But I mean, that's the only time you ever heard from him. And that was so nice. Would it not be so wonderful to go back to that? But anyways, Joe Biden says, a Joe Biden rambling thing that he always does, where he always kind of, he has the stuttering problem, and he has the being older problem. And said something about responding to Trump, the Trump comedian talking about Puerto Rico being a floating island of garbage, and he said something along the lines of the only garbage here. I don't even know what he was trying to say. Is something about the supporters, and it basically came out that the sentence, if you just read it, is that the only garbage here are the Trump supporters. But it was clearly, if you listen to it, it's pretty clear that was not his intent to say that. And that wasn't his intent to say that by the thousands of times he has said he's not insulting these people, that he wants to talk to them, that he wants to, he doesn't think of them badly. He thinks of them as Americans and wants to respect them. But all that doesn't matter because of one, garbled sentence or whatever. And so they're going to turn this in to some major issue at this point, when just a couple of weeks ago, just a week ago, the guy on the other side of this talked about the leftists in this country, which, by the way, are Kamala Harris supporters.
Right.
You don't have to say they're Kamala Harris supporters to know that leftists are Kamala Harris supporters.
Right.
Being the enemy from within. Some of these people are more dangerous than Russia and China and our enemies, our foreign enemies. They're more dangerous than them, he says. They're the enemy from within, and he wants to handle them with the National Guard or possibly the military.
Yeah.
Was given multiple opportunities to clear this up and say, no, I wasn't talking about them. Instead, clarified that he was indeed talking about them. And as examples of the people in that group of people, he used the Adam Schiff, the Pelosi's, and folks like that. Mm-hmm. So what are we doing, man?
Well, Okay, so I'm gonna push back just a little bit, not much, but just a little bit by saying I think we should concede that Biden screwed up. He screwed up majorly because this is the quote. This is the quote. He said, well, he started off talking about the speaker at the rally who called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Trump has never said anything to repudiate that. In fact, I don't know that anybody
they approved
with
it.
the campaign has repudiated that. And like you said, it was vetted. The comics routine was vetted, and he still, that still went through, along with some other very, racist and xenophobic things that this comic said. All right, so Biden then goes on to defend the Puerto Rican people, saying they're good, decent, honorable people. Then he says this, and this is a direct quote: "The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters."
Mm-hmm.
Full stop. That's a problem. That is a problem. He screwed up. He shouldn't have said that. I think he could have said the only garbage that I see or hear is what's coming out of the mouth of the former president and the comic. And I mean, he could have phrased it differently.
That wasn't the whole sentence, though.
Well, no, that was the whole sentence. I'm looking at the direct quote from the Associated Press.
Right, now I know it was a direct quote. I know.
Well, no, that was the whole sentence. Now, he went on to say, in the next sentence, he said, his demonization of Latinos is unconscionable and it's un-American. It's totally contrary to everything we've done, everything we've been. All right, that part was fine, but I think we have to concede he made a mistake. It was a gaffe. He shouldn't have said it. However, and I think this is really your ultimate point, if I understand where you're coming from, and I agree with you on this, you cannot even remotely pretend that there is some kind of equivalency between Joe Biden saying one thing that was regrettable and shouldn't have been said, and Donald Trump saying something every freaking day, multiple times a day, that demonizes, dehumanizes people for disagreeing with him, for not being people that he deems worthy of being in this country. You cannot tell me that what Joe Biden said in his statement there even remotely stacks up to what that comedian said at that rally and other people. I'm sorry,
right.
You just can't do it.
No,
it
you
doesn't
can't
stack up.
And I think my point is I understand that's where the AP cut off the quote, cut off the sentence, and I think that if you're looking at it, it's not necessarily unfair to cut it off right at that particular point. But if you listen to what he said, it was pretty clear it was a Joe Biden type statement where because it was a and I've got the. It was the only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters, his demonization, and it went kind of like that. It was, and so I understand.
So it was a broken. You say it's a broken.
Yeah, it was a broken up kind of. You know how he does. You know how he speaks and how he's always spoken, not just of late, but especially more so of late. And it was, and I think the way, when you look at that and you say, is that what? This is the reason why I give him credit, and I'm not saying this is something that Joe Biden intended to say about these people, is because on so many other occasions he has very clearly stated that this is not the way he feels about Trump supporters and the way that he wants to talk about them, and has never spoken about them in that way or in that manner about anybody. And has never used that type of language sorry, as this is taking place, I looked down and my wife was crawling under the desk here. So I was like, what the hell? There was something going on. She needed something out of the office, so she was trying not to disturb me. which I really appreciate. But I looked down, she was like, I was like, what is going on? But and so that's the reason why I say that, and that's the reason why I think it's really unfair that this is the way this was treated, and they're falling into this trap of the folks who were trying desperately for the last several days to find a way out of the Tony Hinchcliffe, and that's the comedian,
right.
the way to get out from underneath that problem that they had. Is they were searching for that, and now you've given them the out by taking what you know is just, did Biden screw up? Yeah, I mean, he screwed up in the way that Biden always screws up, in that he's talking and a word comes out or a sentence ends in the wrong place or something like that, but you know full well that's not what he meant. They know it. They've covered the man now for 50 years, and they know full well, especially over the last couple of years, and the way he speaks, that's not what he was trying to do. And that quote from him is not the way that he feels about Trump supporters, because he's talked about them so many times and talked about, toning down rhetoric and trying not to, while he talks about Trump being a threat and all that, he does not talk about those people in that way. And I do a lot of times, and I listen, but I'm that way, But I just think that it was unfair.
Okay, and maybe that's the case, but it still plays out poorly because the words are the words. So I hear what you're saying, and of course, it's it's a tough spot to be in. I'm gonna say the reporters are in a tough spot here. If the man says, if you're going to take the words as they actually are, when you start trying to contextualize them, it can be perceived as, being biased and all of that. So I don't know. I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt on that. But I understand what you're saying. It's not consistent with who Biden has been, but my argument is, regardless of how you want to frame what he said, I don't know how in the world anybody with a brain can contend that what he said somehow cancels out or balances out with every freaking thing Trump has ever said about people, going all the way back to when he launched his campaign, calling Mexicans rapists and murderers. I mean, this has been a consistent pattern with Trump. And now he's got these people that follow him, like that comedian whose name I'm not going to say, even though you did, and Vance, same thing. They're saying these objectionable things about people. Trump himself calls Kamala Harris a blank vice president. He used the word, I'll just use it to say what he said. He used the word shit to describe the vice president. They had to, the people that vetted that comedian's routine had to take another objectionable word out that he was going to use about the vice president. That's even worse. That begins with a C. I mean, I'm not going to say it because it's disgusting. But I mean, that's the kind of stuff that has come from that side. So, don't give me all this foolish righteous indignation over one thing that Biden says that doesn't even come close to probably 90% of what Trump and those people on the other side have said.
Well, to me, what all that it is the folks on the right have been trying desperately to move out from underneath the floating island of garbage comment.
Yeah.
They've been trying their best to get out from underneath that comment. And this was their opportunity. And once again, the mainstream folks are falling for the shiny object out there. Because again, they can turn this into another piece of the horse race thing. Is this really close, this really tight camp? Oh, it's a horse race, and we know it's going to be, and this is, in a lot of ways, I'll have agreed, but for different reasons, that the mainstream media folks and the way they cover elections was partly responsible for the way the Trump supporters felt why it was so easy to manipulate them into believing that the election was stolen last time is because we presented it as though it was a basketball game in which one team was down early, and then the other team came back to win. No, these are votes. The votes are in. It's not, just this is the way they're counting them. It's not, there's not more people showing up to the polls or anything. Right. This is the way that it works. And to treat it in this way, I think it leads people to believe that it's easier for them to believe that something nefarious was taking place late in the night and 2:30 in the morning. The votes didn't come in at 2:30. They counted them at the votes came in early in the day, or hell, in some cases weeks before, but you weren't allowed to count them. It just I don't know, man. All of it's bothering me.
Well, and I get I'm going to be less critical of the print press, but more critical of the broadcast media, because they have the ability, I think, to more effectively contextualize things. Yeah. And I agree with you that they're not doing the greatest job on that, and that definitely creates problems.
And I'll tell you where we can be very critical of the print media, at least two of them, and it's the two that are owned by the billionaires that chose not to follow the lead of their editorial staff and endorse Kamala Harris for president. Instead, kowtowing to somebody who they assume, I guess, is going to be a dictator-like president if he is elected, and would punish them, and punish the media for taking the side of his opponent. And in some ways, man, I almost wish that Democrats were a bit more punitive for things. Because listen, this happens in this state all the time. Happens all the time. That's the reason. That's one of the main reasons why Republicans continue to maintain control, despite the fact that so many people know that their policies are stupid, and that their policies drive business away, that their policies are often not business friendly, that their policies often hurt people that some of these folks who are on the Republican side care about, is financial survival for a lot of people. Their businesses rely on government contracts, on contracts with various politicians, on things, on being able to function, on getting, regulated properly by government entities. And so they know that if they don't follow along, if they were to say, let's say you're a media company and you produce a commercial for a candidate who's running against the Republican who ultimately wins, that you're going to be blackballed. I mean, that happens all the time. Happens all of the time around here. And that's what maintains this loyalty, so to speak, to the Republican Party. And maybe it's the same with Democrats in other states. I don't know. I don't live in those states. Maybe it is. No. If it is, it's just as wrong there. But we know that the Washington Post and the LA Times, I know the Washington Post has lost about 10% of its subscribers over the course of the last few days, after Bezos ordered them not to print the Kamala Harris endorsement, and the same for the LA Times. I don't know. I think maybe Lyman and those guys at the Reflector and that group that runs the Alabama Reflector, maybe that's the pathway of the future. And
it looks like it. Yeah.
Where you're not relying upon the whims of political discourse, and whether or not you write a column that pisses off the wrong party
Well, and I think with the Washington Post, for sure, we can say, I don't know about the LA Times so much, because I think they're owned. Aren't they still owned? The LA Times is still owned by is it Sun Young Moon or somebody?
Yeah. So I don't think that's. I don't think
Unification
that's
Church. Was the Unification Church guy? Anyway, we can look that up. But we know the Washington Post is owned by Bezos.
Yes.
The owner of Amazon, Jeff Bezos. And his he's I guess it's a mixed blessing to have a guy like that own one of the nation's most historically most important newspapers, historically speaking, because on the one hand, he's got the resources to take a loss with that paper and it not matter. And you would think that would be a good thing. But then on the other hand, he's got these other business interests outside of the Washington Post that make him billions of dollars a year, apparently. And he's afraid that those business interests, some of which are directly related to government work and potential government contracts, will be compromised. So you have with Bezos an inherent conflict of interest here between his outside businesses and the Washington Post, and that definitely creates a problem in terms of there being a true free press mentality there, and that's unfortunate. In fact, it's a little frightening, to be honest. You know, because it suggests that we're going to have some problems in the future.
Yeah.
Even more problems in the future.
Right. Patrick Soon-Shiong. I'm not sure
LA
I'm pronouncing.
Guy.
That's the LA Times. He is a medical researcher, developed the cancer drug Abraxane, and is also has a number of biomedical startups, and also he's heavy into artificial intelligence.
So I was way off with the Unification Church. I thought they owned the LA Times.
That may have been the case at one point. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean it does not mention that in his at least in the opening couple of graphs of his bio. So he is says South African and American businessman, investor, medical research and transplant specialist. So, but yeah, no, you're right. To what you said, it does. You know, we can't continue down this pathway. It's a problem, and if we do continue down this pathway, you know, that I think people, it should be kind of a scary reminder of people of what, you know, a free press actually means to you, where, you know, no matter whether you agree or disagree, that free press is not being punished for, I mean, you know, it's Fox News. Democrats aren't punishing Fox News for being, you know, essentially a mouthpiece of the Republican Party. You know, and not essentially, hell, they are. I mean, you literally got some of the people working, some of their biggest names over there. We saw through the emails were working directly with the Trump campaign, you know, and with the Trump administration when he was in office to help him with talking points and to kill scandals and things. And so, I mean, you know, that's a bit of a problem. But then we go back to the same double standard, and we talk about how, you know, the mainstream media is in the bag for Harris or what, and it's not that way. You know, it just that's what has continued to drive me crazy about Trump and the way that he has been covered by everybody from the very start. When everyone, including I lump myself into this, did not take him seriously, ever. Did not. I never believed that the American people would be stupid enough to elect this idiot. I mean, really. And you want to talk about garbage. This garbage human being. I never expected that he would become the president of the United States of America. And right. I never took him seriously. And in doing so, I inadvertently gave him attention, the attention that he sought, that was, for some reason or another, appealing to people. I always figured that they would see him for the same goofy, I mean, even the people who didn't believe in my politics would see this guy as a goofy, bumbling, racist, you know, wannabe dictator guy. You know, and,
sort of Bozo the Clown with presidential aspirations almost,
And we didn't cover him properly. We didn't relay to people the seriousness of it and now it was too late.
Well, you know, in fairness to us, I think you know, those of us in the media, I think we honestly had never seen anybody with his brazen hubris and with the audacity to do the things that he said and did. It was kind of jarring, really.
Yes.
And it was kind of difficult not to see him almost as the gorilla behind the class that's doing crazy things, and you're just kind of fascinated, like, really, he's doing that? We've never seen that before, or wouldn't have expected that. And I think and I also think that he did that so much that he desensitized us. And it was easy to sort of just start, okay, well, there he goes again. And I think we did not realize, even after he was elected, the sheer capacity to go to the lengths that he went to literally try to steal an election, not just with the riot on January 6th, but with all of the machinations leading up to that, with the fake electors and calling the secretaries of state and trying to put pressure, just unprecedented kind of stuff. So I think now that we know better, we should do better.
Yeah,
and,
we're not going to.
And that's where it stands right now.
We're not going to. We're just not. And it's just, I for whatever reason, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say for whatever reason. I know the reason. The reason is Trump gives people the okay to hate certain people, to feel aggrieved as white people, to act as though they're victims, to play this victimhood card, to pretend as though they've been wronged in some way by a society that has been trying to make it right. So, a lot of historical wrongs right, that they have in the process been wronged in some way. The fact that people coming here to try to live out the American dream are somehow a threat to them and their way of life. That all of these things, this is things that they want to feel, that, and now they have been given the green light to feel those ways by this particular person, and they've also been given cover to say, to use it as an excuse, to use other things as an excuse to vote for this person for those reasons, but to say publicly these other things. Oh, he's good for the economy, when there's absolutely no proof of that whatsoever, ever. I mean, he inherited a great economy and destroyed it. I mean, what proof is there that he did anything to help the economy, that he cares about us? He didn't give a shit about you. He didn't give a shit about anybody but himself. He's pro-America. He's not pro-America. He's pro-Donald Trump. He's never been. If he was pro-America, he would give a shit about the Constitution every once in a while, and all of those things, and the Christianity stuff, the phony Christianity stuff from this guy who couldn't name you a Bible verse if you spotted him, Jesus or wept. Okay. He couldn't name any of them. All right. He couldn't.
That's a good line, Josh. Good line.
Thank you. I came up with that. That's one I'm on. I may use that in a column someday. But this is where we are, and
I know we got to get out of this segment, but real quickly, did you see Jimmy Kimmel's his monologue to Republicans?
No.
You should check it out. It's pretty funny and pretty smart. And he really speaks directly to Republicans in a way that I think is probably about as effective as you can in terms of why they should not be supporting Trump. I think he just did it within the past few days or something. But I saw it on YouTube. Yeah.
I'll check that out. I'll check out Mr. Kimmel. He's had some pretty good stuff. His man on the street interviews have been really, really good as well. All right, let's slide out of here. We're going to come back. We got a couple of guests, starting with Representative Sam Jones. Going to come in and break down the pro-growth conference and some other stuff. So we'll be back with Representative Jones in just a minute. Alabama Politics This Week. Back in a moment. All righty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we are happy, as always, to have with us Representative Sam Jones. Representative Jones, thank you for coming in, spending some time today.
Sure, my pleasure.
Absolutely. The reason we wanted to talk to you, there was an event in Selma that was sponsored by the Democrats that I think kind of speaks to something that I wrote about last session, which is the Democrats becoming the party of responsible government and looking at ways to grow business in this state in responsible ways and working with and becoming really a source of reliability for a lot of businesses to come in and say, hey, we can rely on these folks not to be crazy, unlike the Republicans who keep chasing folks away. And so you held a pro-growth conference in Selma. I guess just tell me what the event was for and how it went.
Well, each year we sponsor a pro-growth conference, and it's really for us to develop our policies for the incoming session that will be coming in February. So we actually meet all during the time out of the legislature to prepare our policies for and also our priorities for the next session. And in doing that, we usually call in a lot of experts, people who are in those various areas of concern, and get them to make presentations to us and let us ask questions about what's the best approach to getting some things done as it relates to, first of all, we talked a lot about education yesterday, about especially teachers and staff in education. At present, they don't have workman's comp, and it's really causing a real issue for them. The other problem we talked about is being able to recruit more teachers and what's the best methods for us to use in the classrooms to improve our education, the quality of our education in the state of Alabama. And that was a very good session. We talked about also healthcare. We talked about the expansion of healthcare. We heard a presentation from Blue Cross Blue Shield on an option that they're really interested in presenting to the state. We have not made any progress as it relates to Medicaid expansion in the state over the years. And as a result, we have hospitals closing in a lot of our rural areas, as well as maternity services not being offered in most places in the state of Alabama. So those are also issues we talked about. And then we talked about gaming, where we are with that. We had some consultants come in from the innovation group who are very knowledgeable, experts in the field. They actually consult with some 150 operators throughout the country, and even some that's not in the United States. So we thought that they were very, very knowledgeable, and we wanted to talk to them about Alabama and gaming in Alabama. And one of the things they said to us that since you have not passed a gaming bill and you haven't given people an opportunity to vote on it, one of the things that you have that's positive is you have the experience of all the other gaming operations. See what they did right, what they did wrong, what's the revenue generators, how do we actually control gaming, the legality of it in the state. He said there are already people who've already gone through that process. Some made mistakes, some did it well. You can actually pick from that right now. And I thought we did on last year when we worked on that. So, and it was a very, very educational conference for us, as well as giving us a lot of information and data to work with in developing our priorities for next session.
Yeah. All of those things that you made, well, I mean, the education and healthcare, certainly. And I think I've heard the presentation, or heard of the presentation from Blue Cross Blue Shield. In kind of a broad overview. I probably don't have the details that y'all got at the conference, but, where it's kind of a public-private partnership, sort of expansion of things, which, is not the standard Medicaid, just expansion, but
Right.
it is something that has been tried in some other states with some success, and it does open up some opportunities there, and for a lot of people to obtain health care who wouldn't ordinarily have it, who fall in that gap, and also to expand healthcare offerings throughout the state. That along with education has got to be two of the biggest obstacles that we face in this state in terms of attracting businesses here and in growing the state. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yes. I think that is a real problem throughout our efforts to recruit and really improve economic development. I think that one of the things we are concerned about is how do we enhance the quality of life for people who are in the state, and at the same time have that quality of life be a positive attraction for people to come to the state. So we've been working on that, and some of the presenters we had yesterday talked about that, even talked about the education as it relates to virtual education and how to best apply it in schools. You know, we have that now where kids can do that, but there was some discussion about someone staying on the line some while they were working with them so they could answer questions. So we had some experts in that area who came and did very, very good presentation. Also, one that I didn't mention, we did a little discussion about criminal justice system and what's happening with that and some of the changes that we think are necessary in that, especially in the areas of pardon and parole, in the areas of rehabilitation rather than just incarceration. Those were some of the other discussions that were taking place. So it was a pretty heavy agenda as it relates to what we wanted to cover and what we want the outcome to be.
Representative Jones, I'm glad you're with us here today, especially after the conference that you just attended. And I want us to go back to for a minute to rural health care, something that I think many Alabamians are probably concerned about, or at the very least should be concerned about. There's one of the counties here in the state, I want to say it's Colbert County, I could be wrong about that, is down to one ambulance, according to news reports. One ambulance. This, it appears to me, is an absolute, immediate, urgent crisis. Not just what's happening in that one county, but what's happening across the state, especially in the more rural parts of the state. Why haven't we been able to address this problem successfully? Why hasn't there been more urgency about this from our elected leaders? And what can we do about this?
We have, that has been one of our top priorities over the last two sessions, trying to get something done about expanding Medicaid as a method of getting health care and maintaining health care in rural areas. I was on my way back to Mobile and drove to Thomasville and saw the very nice hospital they have now that's now closed. It was closed short a while back, and that really is something that we really have to look at. That means that those folk have to drive long distances to get access to health care. And, you know, the other thing about it is when we wanted Medicaid expansion, we tried to get Medicaid expansion and we're still trying to work on that. Um, the thing about that is when you have Medicaid expanding to rural areas, you have doctors that expand their practices in those areas. Without the people ability to pay, you can't attract healthcare professionals there, and they can't successfully run a clinic or run an office there. So it really is something that we think is a top priority in the state, as well as mental health services. It's another priority that really is dwindling, not just in rural areas. In many of the metropolitan areas, the services are inadequate. We're understaffed. We're underfunded, and it's becoming a real issue, and it's been a real issue in the state. But it's one of our top priorities. You'll always see it on the table when we have an agenda. It will always be there. One of the things that I think I've seen in the past, some people are hesitant to be upfront with what our needs are in healthcare because of political reasons. They don't want to call it Obamacare. And you know, our position is you can call it whatever care you want as long as the people get the services they need. So that stigma was attached to it for a long time. And healthcare expansion as a whole was attached to Obamacare, which that's really not the name of it. It's the Affordable Care Act. But people do that, and sometimes that gets in the way of providing adequate services to people, just the politics of it does.
Well, you know, speaking of politics, and I'm glad you brought this up, if I were the Democratic Party in Alabama, and Josh, the next time we have Chairman Kelly on, I may just, if I remember, I'm going to bring this up with him as well. If I were the Democratic Party in Alabama, my 2026 campaign, from governor on down, I would try to unify all of the candidates around making rural health care the number one issue that we attacked Republicans on. And I know that some people will cringe and say you shouldn't politicize something like this, but it is a real issue. Yeah. And it's something that affects people's lives, as we've just discussed, in a very real way. And quite frankly, the Republicans have done nothing to protect not only the people who live in these depleted rural areas, but to protect those of us who travel through them, who may get sick, who may have car accidents, who may suffer some kind of a problem while we're in these areas, depleted areas. What do you think about that as a political strategy?
I think that that's always on the table when Democrats in re-election mode. People asked about that. People consider that a priority. We consider it a priority. But when you get into the process and try to get that done, really in Alabama and all states, the expansion of Medicaid requires the governor's action and not just the legislature. The legislature has the part of coming up with the funding, but the governor has to agree to work with the federal government to get that done. And so far, we've not seen that take place.
Well, that's why I'm saying I think the next Democratic gubernatorial candidate and whoever else is running for statewide office, they ought to be unified on making that their number one issue and really pressing the Republicans hard on why they have allowed things to deteriorate to this point. I want to ask you one final question, sir, and that's about Selma. You had this pro-growth conference in Selma. Selma is almost like sacred ground, I think, to many of us in this state when it comes to social justice and civil rights. And yet Selma is also one of the most economically deprived areas in an area, meaning not just Selma, but the Black Belt as a whole, which is struggling. During this conference, did you all discuss Selma, what's happening in Selma, what's happening in the Black Belt, and maybe any policies that can be implemented to try to help that area?
I would just say that we had a number of mayors from the various cities in the Black Belt. We had the Mayor Perkins from Selma who was there. We had the mayor from Monroeville, and we had several mayors that were there. Be quite honest with you, I think there are a lot of efforts taking place in Selma to bring that city back to its viability. It's hard work, and it takes a lot of cooperation, and I think that cooperation is there from what I've seen. We stayed in the hotel there in Selma. The meeting facilities were great. The hospitality was excellent. And I think Selma is making all the efforts it can to revitalize their city. And as much as the legislature can help, I would like to see us be a part of that, because Selma is a landmark and a historic landmark in the state of Alabama. And if you really look at the city as a whole, it can be a great city. It just needs the assistance to redevelop, as they are doing in Selma. There's a lot going on in Selma, and I was very appreciative of being there. We decided that we will start moving our meetings around the state. They're usually in large metropolitan areas. Selma is the first meeting we've had in a Black Belt city. So I think you'll see us continue to move around to assist in their efforts to revitalize that city.
Yeah, I want to get into the gambling just a little bit more in depth, because I know there were some presentations that were made there from some folks. The Porch Creek Indians were there, and they made a presentation. I'm pretty sure Louis Benefield was there as well from Victoryland and Birmingham Race Course, and then the innovative group that you talked about as well. And where right now, because you were the head, the Democratic head of the gambling group in the House. Where do you kind of feel like things are right now in terms of actually getting gambling legislation passed?
Well, quite frankly, there is a lot of discussion going on in different circles about it. I don't know of any specific proposal that I've had an opportunity to review, but I think that it's still on the table. And one of the reasons it's on the table is we do need new revenue in the state to address some of the things that we've been talking about here and some of the things we talked about at our policy conference. But,
Mhm.
I think that that's here. Some proposals are proposals that are realistic. I think that one of the best shots we had at gaming was in the last session. There was actually some very proactive meetings and discussions and really a lot of bipartisan discussion about this issue. And
Mhm.
even the political side of the issue kind of toned down. And I think that approach to everybody starting at square one and working together to come up with a proposal that is acceptable to just about everybody there. That took place last year. This year coming up, I've heard some various things that people are talking about trying to introduce, but I think it has to be a comprehensive proposal. I think it has to be one that takes in all of the problems we have in Alabama. We already have some gaming institutions that have been ruled to be illegal. There are court cases still pending. There's really no real enforcement arm to take care of that. The gaming commission would have handled all that was put in place, would have their own people that monitor gaming and issue a license and police the process. We really don't have that now. And as a result of that, we have a lot of illegal gambling. One of the things that was brought before us is sports betting. Sports betting is taking place in Alabama using illegal sites, but the data that they have shows that Alabama is the number two state in the nation where people try to do sports betting and they're not allowed to do it because it's not legal in Alabama. But it is the number
Scoundrels.
even ahead of the state of California.
Yeah,
And
those
that, by the
scoundrels.
way,
I can't believe those people would try that sports betting around here.
by the
It's,
way, those figures are pre-football figures. The largest
yeah.
intake is doing football, and those are pre-football figures. And I think the provider who really came in and talked to us was basically saying that they think Alabama lost about anywhere between 30 to $70 million so far this year on sports betting. So it's not that it's not happening. Very same thing with gambling and a lot of other things that may be happening illegal. It's not whether people are gonna gamble, it's where
Hmm.
that becomes the
Right.
question.
Yeah.
It's not if they're going to
Yeah.
do it, it's where. I
That's
know
right. That's
specifically in
right.
this area, in the Mobile area, we have Florida on one side, we have as many casinos as you want on the other side in Mississippi. So it's not that our people don't gamble, they just don't gamble here.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, even that, it always drives me insane when I hear the argument from the other side that says, "Well, we don't want that gambling in Alabama," and I'm always like, "What are you talking about? You got three Porch Creek facilities currently offering, with casinos. You
Right.
have Victory Land, the Birmingham Racecourse. I don't know what all they've got in Greene County these days, and I mean, you've got all those things running in Jefferson County. You've got the dog tracks in Mobile down there. It's insane to me to hear people when they say that, and what we don't have is the revenue that other states enjoy from this practice. And I thought that the bill that came out of the House was probably the best bill that I had seen in 20 years of covering this, and because I've done gambling for a long time now in this state, and covered it, and and talked to all the people involved, and that was probably the best and most agreed upon piece of legislation that I have seen, and it covered everybody. It would have generated a ton of revenue for the state. It was smart. It was going to create 15,000 jobs. It was going to create resort destinations around the state, and we were going to have a good bill. And then it got screwed up in the Senate because they wanted to be children. up there and placate some other folks and whatnot. And it's my understanding now that the House is kind of taking a back seat and going to let the Senate come up with something. And I heard just out of this conference alone that's already not going very well. That there was some disagreement with a couple of Democratic senators over who was going to do what and trying to dictate to the House what they were going to have to do. And I guess my question is the House still? Do you feel like the House is still pretty well set on being able to get something done? And do you have any faith at all that the Senate is going to be able to do it?
It's difficult to say. I think in the House, keep in mind that in the House, our caucus voted unanimously on the gaming bill. You hardly ever see that in any caucus. Vote unanimously. And even when some changes were made, they still voted. So the issue wasn't with our caucus. Did we get everything we want out of it? No, we didn't. That's not called negotiation. That's called dictation when you get everything you want. And in this process, you have to be able to work together. I thought we worked together very well. I think the speaker worked very well with all of us who was working on the issue. Right now, I think that the House is open to proposals, but usually when you get proposals that's made up in the corner with one little group of people, it winds up not being sellable to the others. So I think the approach that was used in the House is really the best approach, where we start from the ground floor, working together, meeting from time to time, seeing, okay, can we live with this or can we live with that, and moving forward. If you go and just try to push it down someone's throat, it's not going to happen. But I'm really optimistic about the House side. I'm not as familiar with what's taking place in the Senate. Sometimes you'll find people in the Senate that just put in a bill because they told somebody they're going to put it in, knowing it's not going anywhere. And the same thing happens sometimes in the House also. But on the serious side, it's something that we need to address for a number of reasons. One of the most important reasons this year is that we are going to have some real issues with revenue in the state. There are going to be some issues. There's no more federal money. There's no more COVID money. There's no more grants from the federal government as it relates to patching holes. So we're going to have to come up with some method. And I've heard someone describe that we were one vote away from $1 billion last session. And that being the case, I think people will remember that coming this session. But I'm optimistic that we can work something out if people are genuinely interested in addressing this issue, and people are genuinely interested in bringing new revenue sources to the table for the state of Alabama.
Yeah, well, I hope that your method of doing things and the way this went in the House and how y'all approached it in the professional way you went about it, and really the necessarily detached way that you approached it, and I mean that from the standpoint of doing what was best for the state and not what was best for y'all, personally on a lot of different things. I think that's the approach that should be taken. I don't think some people are doing that currently on the Senate side, and I would, I would warn them that you go too far down that road, and all of a sudden, folks with badges get involved, and I worry that that may be the case, and this thing gets blown up somewhere, and it all gets screwed up. But listen, hey. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing that was very educational on yesterday. Dr. Benefield, who owns the facility in Birmingham, gave a little history of that facility, and also gave a little history of how it's been affected by the various changes in Alabama law and enforcement of Alabama law, and what's been the real obstacle to them moving forward. They don't have some of the rights that Porch Creek and other folk who are under federal laws have. And what they would like to do, they are just saying, look, we'll be willing to compete on an even playing field with in any process, as long as the process is at the point where people in Alabama have an even opportunity, an equal opportunity to be successful in the business, like everyone else. And so we got some issues with cleaning all of that up, the law and how it's managed. But that bill would have done that. The initial House bill would have taken care of all of that and provided the enforcement for it.
Yeah, it's very rare in this. I've covered it for a long time. It's very rare that that Lewis Benefield, formerly those places were owned by Milton McGregor, and the Porch Creeks and the folks Nat Wynn and his group over in Green. It's very rare that those folks have been on the same side. They were on the same side and in support of that bill, and that's one of the main reasons it was a good bill. And I thought it really was, and I don't understand why we can't go back to that bill and try to get a couple of little things cleaned up in there and push it through.
I think that would certainly speed up the process. If that bill was taken and tweaked one way or another, it will certainly speed up the process. And everybody knows what's in it. Everybody's seen it. And really, there are just a few things that need to be tweaked, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think it could sail through, and I think it would have the support. And there are a couple of things that you could do on the Senate side to make sure a couple of those guys got on board with it, and and I think that would push it on through. But here we are talking reason and common sense, and that has no place in politics, I don't think. So, but hey, Representative Jones, thank you for spending some time and breaking all this down. As always, it is always, whenever you're on, it's always educational, informative, and we really do appreciate it. That's all we're trying to do is keep folks informed.
Well, thank you.
That's right.
All right, thank you. Care. That is Representative Sam Jones. He's one of the best. That's the reason why they put him up on those groups to handle complicated matters like they do. So we're going to slide out. It's Alabama Politics This Week. We'll be back in just a minute.
Welcome back to Alabama Politics This Week. Of course, that guy over there is Josh Moon. I'm David Person, and we are pleased to have with us the Democratic candidate for the 6th Congressional District, Elizabeth Anderson. Elizabeth, welcome to Alabama Politics This Week.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we are glad to have you on, and you are I think it's fair to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, you are a newcomer to politics, right?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
First time running for office, not my first time ever being involved. So I've typically been involved in more of an activist organizing capacity previously, but first time running for office. Classic first run for office, U.S. House, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, that's good, though. I mean, because as I understand it, your opponent, Gary Palmer, the incumbent congressman representing this district, has not had a competitor in, 6 years? Something like that. So you decided that you were going to jump into the race rather than have him run unopposed. And speaking as somebody who's active with the Democratic Party up in this part of the state, Madison County, I'm glad to see you do that, because it's hard to get people sometimes to jump in and run. So kudos to you for that. Tell us about yourself. You live in Shelby County, I understand, and you're an entrepreneur. Is that right?
That's right. I live in Shelby County currently, near Birmingham, so not too far outside the city. I'm originally from Childersburg, Alabama, which is a teeny tiny little town about an hour outside of Birmingham. Grew up there my whole life until I went to the University of Alabama. I grew up below the poverty line, so I had a really tough upbringing when I was there. I'm a first-generation college student. Ultimately was able to go to college through a combination of Pell Grants and scholarship funding. And now through many zigs and zags, I am a business owner here in Birmingham. My business is called Lunar Lab. We are software designers. We do design and strategy for software, but the way that we do it is that we want to make sure the software that we design, of course, is, profitable, and it meets all of the business goals, and it's really aligned to what the business is trying to do. But we also make sure that software is ethical, it's inclusive, it's accessible, because we really strongly feel that software should be for everybody.
I love that. I love that fusion of capitalistic goals and progressive values. I love that. That's very cool. So my understanding is that one of your chief platform or items or talking points is reproductive rights. That you're a strong advocate for reproductive rights. We saw up here in North Alabama that for now State Representative Marilyn Lands, that was a winning ticket for her. How's that playing out down there in the 6th Congressional District?
Well, this issue is so important and it hasn't been addressed in this district adequately in a long time. Like you said, we haven't had anybody run as a Democrat against Gary Palmer since 2018. For me, it's one of the main reasons why I jumped into the race, right? We had the Dobbs decision. Shortly after that, that was devastating. But right on the heels of that, Shelby County lost all of our maternity wards. Yeah. Which we don't have a maternity ward in Shelby County, one of the biggest and wealthiest counties in Alabama. People don't have anywhere to go. They have to go to neighboring counties. They have to drive long distances. In addition to the fact that we already have some of the highest maternal and infant mortality rates in the entire nation. So, it's awful. It needs to be addressed. Our current representative has been one of the biggest proponents of fetal personhood. He's voted to, we know that he's voted against abortion rights, but he's also voted against IVF. He's voted against contraceptive access. And so just over and over and over again, I felt like we needed to have someone stand up and actually talk about those things in this district, particularly around maternal health care, because when I think about reproductive rights, I think about maternal and infant health care as well, because these things are so interwoven and aligned with each other. We needed to have somebody to do it. How it's playing out is that people are excited to talk about it, right? Like we need to talk about it. We saw this really devastating IVF ruling here in Alabama recently. People came out. They wanted to talk about it. There were protests in Montgomery, that all happened at a state level. It was really important. And they were able to be effective. And we've got a law now. It's a Band-Aid fix. We need to do better. But people want to discuss it. And people have come out and they've been really supportive of the campaign specifically on this topic because we deserve better.
David mentioned it's often hard to get folks to run. And because look, let's be honest, you're facing an uphill battle. He's got more money. He's in a Republican state. He's, we know what the likely outcome here is going to be. But you know what? Those were the likely outcomes over in Georgia for a number of years as well. And those were the outcomes in Georgia for a number of years as well. But you continued to have the conversations and you continued to build, on these policies and these ideas that people were responding to. People like these things, that they want somebody to come in and fix the IVF issue. They want somebody to talk about women's reproductive rights and how in the hell we're going to get a birthing center back in all of Shelby County, for God's sakes. Right. And so they want these things, and the more you talk about them, the more ground you start to make up over the course of years. And it'll take years, if not a couple of decades. But you've got to start somewhere. And so I wonder, have you seen, as this has gone on, have you seen the campaign kind of grow and people become more receptive? And also, what do you feel like would help you move that forward in the future, in future races?
I have so much to say on this topic. First of all, this is absolutely uphill battle race, right? I knew the odds going in. I knew what it was like. It is hard to get people to run because they look at races like this one where it's so heavily gerrymandered, where we have an incumbent sitting on tons and tons of money. They have a really good base, a really solid base here in this district. And why would someone do this, right? Well, I'm a long-term thinker. I'm a strategic thinker. And I kind of looked at where we were and thought to myself, well, we don't have any kind of infrastructure here in District 6, right? We don't have a donor base. We don't have a volunteer base. So when I started this campaign, I started from scratch. There was nothing out here. I've been building it and building it and building it. Kind of like when we're building a house, we have to build a foundation before we can put the roof on, right? We can't just come in and expect to put the roof on. So I'm working really hard in this district to build that foundation because I think of it as this sort of long-term goal that we deserve better, we need better, but we need some time to build it. Throughout this campaign, in the beginning stages, because I was starting from scratch, it was really challenging because, first of all, I had to prove myself and let people know that I was not just, some weirdo out here just putting my name in the hat. But also, it was very difficult to get national support because a lot of national organizations look at a race like this one and they think, well, that's not worth our resources. It's not worth our efforts to put anything into it. I think that's wrong. And the reason for that is because we have a lot of people here who deserve to have better access to maternal and infant health care. And when we say it's not worth it, we're leaving all of those people behind, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, I wanted to stand up and fight for my community and do something for my community because I think that we are worth more and I think that we should not be left behind. So what I need to build up going forward is that I need to keep building that grassroots base. And we do need to start getting some support from national organizations. And in order to do that, we're going to have to prove ourselves here. Now, I was really excited that over the summer, we raised almost the exact same amount as my Republican opponent. So we were kind of neck and neck on fundraising over the summer. That was really exciting. So if we can continue to prove ourselves, if we can get enough people out to vote, we can show these national organizations and even the internal party that, hey, we're worth your time, that this is a place where we need to keep fighting. And secondly, we should not leave races unopposed, right? It's been devastating to me every time I've gone in to vote for the past few years. I did not have another choice on the ballot, and that's not what democracy is about. We should always have another choice on the ballot. And then the final thing that I want to say on this topic is that this district, we know it is one of the reddest districts in the nation. We know it's heavily gerrymandered. They cut it to win it, right? If you go in and look at the maps, it is house by house in some areas where they've surgically been selected what's in and what's out of this district. That being said, what I want to do is have better maternal and infant health care and better reproductive rights. Better rights all around for everybody in this district, not one side, not the other. I don't want Republican women to die in labor any more than I want Democrat women to die in labor. So what we've seen in this district is that very early on, I started getting a lot of support from Republican women. We know we need to convert them. We know we need to reach out to them. So we've been very intentional about reaching out to everybody. And like I said, early on, we started getting, people just started handing me $50 bills.
Nice.
Yeah. And what it was they are Republican women who wanted to donate anonymously, and the cap on an anonymous donation is $50 in cash. Nice. So, we went out and we talked about that a little bit more. And then I started getting lots of $50 bills in the P.O. box, no return address. I can see that they're postmarked Alabama. There's no note, but we know that these are Republican women who want to donate anonymously to the campaign. They want to support the campaign. We know a lot of them are going to vote in the ballot box because they want better rights too, right?
Right.
And for a lot of us women, we're sort of in it together. And so if we can kind of get out here and prove ourselves and show that Alabama is worth fighting for, that District 6 is worth fighting for, and that our rights are worth fighting for, I think that is going to go a long way in the long term.
Yeah, I think so. And it just so if people wonder what happened, we didn't kill David. His internet kind of crashed out, and so he's working to get that back. But and hopefully he will before we have to get out. But how has, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase it. How has the state party been? In terms of helping out with especially a newcomer into a political race. How has that worked?
Well, like I said, they didn't come to me. I came to them. Nobody recruited me. I came out of nowhere, right? I'm an oldest daughter, so for this race, I was like, well, somebody's got to do it. I guess I will. Right.
Yeah.
When I came into this, I had to reach out to them and say, hey, I'm here. I qualified. This is what I'm doing. In the initial stages, the county parties were really helpful. Now, we don't have functioning county parties in every part of District 6, unfortunately. Even though we have lots of Democrats, lots of progressives out in those counties, we don't have an organization. So one of the biggest challenges for me right away was we did not, everything is so disparate, right? There's not really a cohesive organization. Some of the counties were able to be more helpful than others. I will say that the state party has been a lot more excited as we have been able to raise more and as we are getting the word out. It kind of snowballs, right?
Yes.
So it took a while to sort of build up to it. And now the snowball is rolling. The state party has been a lot more excited. They were able to share some data with me, and they sent out a fundraising email that I was very grateful for. But we do need better infrastructure, sort of top to bottom here in Alabama. One of the biggest challenges for me running this campaign is that we don't have that infrastructure. There wasn't anybody that I could lean on day one that was like, this is how you run a political campaign. I really had to go out and sort of figure it out myself. I had to sort of build these list of volunteers and list of donors and list of supporters. I had to build all of that kind of from scratch, and it was really challenging. And so for me, like I said earlier, I'm a long-term thinker. So one of the things that I'm thinking about even after this race is how do we build that up? Like, how do we organize here in Alabama so that when a candidate starts to run or decides that they want to run, or even if they just have like a twinkle in their eye and they're thinking about it, how do we make it really easy for them to get started so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming that you don't, because you don't know when you first start running about some of these sort of inner workings.
Yeah, no, you're right. Let me just last thing. So it kind of sounds like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you have been surprised by the amount of support, especially from, supposedly Republican women, that has come your way. And do you think that is indicative of the state as a whole, that there is a potentially an untapped market of folks out there that we're just not reaching, and who are perfectly willing, whether behind their husbands' backs or not, whatever, and that's perfectly fine too. Everyone I've encouraged to vote your interest, vote for yourselves and vote for especially your own life. But do you feel like that? Am I right in saying you've been surprised by just the sheer volume of this?
I would say in some ways I've been surprised, in some ways I haven't. So I'm a lifelong Alabama resident. I have never lived anywhere except for the state of Alabama, and I like it here. I love it here. And my sense the entire time that I have lived here is that I think the people of this state are a little bit more progressive than what our voting record reflects. And I think a large part of that is because, like I said earlier, they're cutting it to win it, right? Like, we are very gerrymandered here. We're incredibly voter suppressed here. I've been having a lot of conversations with people who have found out that Alabama does not have early voting. We don't have that here. And that's another way that we're suppressing the vote here, right? People can't get out and vote. It's very hard. We have a lot of low income people in Alabama. We have a very high poverty rate here. It's difficult if you're working multiple jobs, and this is like shift work, to be able to get out to vote, especially if you don't have reliable transportation. So it is very hard. It's gerrymandered. It's voter suppressed here. And the other thing is that we don't often talk about is the fact that the other side really depends on us to be too depressed to go out and vote, right? We don't have anybody to vote for, and we're like, well, why bother? Even I went and voted in the primary this year, and when I got there, they handed me what was essentially a blank sheet of paper for the Democrats, right? We don't have any. You're like, why am I here? Like, why bother? And so the other side really counts on us to feel those feelings of hopelessness. Like, why should I bother? There's nobody for me to vote for. So I think we don't go out and vote, and then our state looks a lot redder than it actually is. So in that sense, I haven't necessarily been surprised. But one thing that did surprise me very early on was the number of people who came out and they said, oh my gosh, they're like whispering, I didn't know that you were a Democrat. I'm a Democrat too. Like, I didn't know that we could talk about this, right? Like, so people have been scared to say it, and they've been a little bit scared to be open about it. And now as they are becoming more open about it, they're finding out that their neighbors feel the same way, and maybe their family members and their friends feel the same way that they do. We had a lady who was, she was thinking about taking a yard sign, but she was like really scared too. And she said, what if my neighbors get mad at me? Like, what if they don't like it? And, I feel like my sons are pretty inoffensive because I'm trying to work for everybody. But she was really worried. And another lady said, well, just put it in your yard for 24 hours and see what happens, And so she put it out in her yard. She called me the next afternoon and she said, oh my gosh, I put that sign out this morning and I took my dog for a walk. And like 3 people came up to me in my neighborhood and they said, oh my gosh, I did not know there were other progressives in this neighborhood. I'm so excited. So now she has all these new friends. And so I think if we can talk about it openly and share it with our friends and talk to our friends and family members without it being this shameful thing, I think we might all be a little surprised that there are more of us out here than anybody thinks. And we got to get out. Like, we got to get out and vote every single time.
Yeah. I often tell people, some of the biggest races we have for governor, for statewide office and stuff, the split at worst is 60-40, Republican to Democrat, and the turnout, even in our highest races, we leave 40% of registered voters sitting on the couch somewhere. There are numbers to win in those places, in a lot of places in this state. If we could find candidates like yourself who are going to work for it and get on the ballot and try and start to build those coalitions and build the trust and build name recognition and do all that. So thank you for doing it. I know it's been a ton of work and you knew the uphill battle when you started, but thank you for doing it and for coming on and spending some time with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. I just really appreciate all of the work that y'all do to kind of, make more voices heard in this political arena, because like I said, people don't want to talk about it, but we have to talk about it because these policies are our lives. So
absolutely. Yeah. And on behalf of David, I know he would say that he really appreciates you coming on and doing it as well. I hate his internet gave out on him, but I'm sure he'll enjoy the way we handled this. But thank you so much, Elizabeth. And listen, y'all go out and vote and support, and remember that the things are never as grim as they seem. We've got an opportunity to do some stuff here. So, all right, we're going to slide out. It's Alabama Politics This Week. Back in a minute. All righty. Welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week, one of the finest run and produced podcasts on all of your podcast platforms. We're brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment, and we want to appreciate the Porch Band, the Creek Indians, and those folks for sponsoring this fine program, along with the Southern Poverty Law Center and all the other folks who support us and help us out with guests and with everybody else. And so we do really appreciate everybody. If you'd like to go and give us a review on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate that as well, as long as it's a good one. If it's a bad one, just keep that shit in your pocket. We don't care to hear that. Or you could email it to us at apwproducer@gmail.com. That's apwproducer@gmail.com. We'd be happy to hear from you if you got that or any other show suggestions or questions or anything else. All righty. We're going to wrap this thing up with a right wing nut in just a minute. But first, I wanted to talk about one thing that happened this week, and that is the mistrial in the Big John Williams murder trial in Lowndes. It was actually the case was being tried in Macon County. And but Williams was the sheriff in Lowndes County when he was shot dead in a gas station parking lot by a young man who was apparently the son of a police officer in Montgomery County. So this happened. Chase, pull up his exact name. Chase Johnson is his name. And so the basic story was this: a bunch of kids were going out to a field apparently to have a bonfire type party. And they they were locked out of the field. The gate was up, the chain was up or something. They went to the gas station instead to kind of gather up, I guess, decide where they were going to go. They were all in the parking lot playing the music real loud. The store clerk, I guess, called the police to say, hey, look, you got to come get these kids out of my parking lot. Williams heard the call. He was off duty. He was not in his official police vehicle, was not in uniform. Went to the gas station to kind of help disperse the crowd, get the kids out of there. As he was there and telling them to leave, according to numerous witnesses, he identified himself as the sheriff, told them that it was time to turn the music down and get out of the parking lot, and move along. And there was a confrontation between Williams and another young man there who was a friend of Johnson's. When Johnson saw the confrontation taking place, he jumped out of his truck and went over there and told, according to one witness, told Williams to get the fuck back. To which Williams, according to this one witness who was apparently nearby, said to him, son, I'm the sheriff, get back in your truck. Or vice versa, son, get back in your truck, I'm the sheriff. He, at that point, according to this witness, said, I don't give a fuck who you are. And then there was a back and forth between them, and they eventually arrived at the driver's side door of Johnson's truck, where the majority of the witnesses at the trial, including the ones put on by the defense, say there was certainly back and forth exchange there. Johnson claimed that Williams, the sheriff, was choking him, leaning through the window, choking him, when he reached back, fearing for his life and unaware that this was the sheriff, reached back behind his seat and retrieved his gun and fired one time in defense of his life and killed the sheriff in the parking lot. The other folks say they did not see any sort of physical contact between them. Some of the other witnesses said they did not see any physical contact between the two of them. They did see William standing at Johnson's door of the truck with the door ajar, and they all heard the gunshot and saw Williams fall to the ground. So from that, a jury in this state could not determine whether or not a crime was committed. Because they were, a lot of people say, well, if capital murder, it takes a lot to convince somebody it's capital murder. Well, no, they had lesser charges they could consider, up to and including manslaughter, which is simply the criminal, the criminal act of killing someone even in the heat of the moment. All right, it's wrongfully killing someone, taking someone's life in the heat of the moment. And so they couldn't, which basically means they couldn't determine if a crime was committed here, whether or not this was self-defense. He shot the sheriff dead in the parking lot, and our gun laws are such that we cannot determine whether or not that is a crime.
Yeah, which, as you pointed out in your column, is a major challenge, and I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to be brief. But also another interesting point that's been raised here, Josh, that I think you raised in your column, if I'm not mistaken, is that it would be interesting to see what the jury's finding would have been if Williams, the sheriff, had been white and the shooter had been black.
Yes.
And I dare say, I'm glad, I think you did bring that up, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did, because I think it's a relevant question in terms of evaluating the jury's decision-making process. We know how things are, not just in Alabama, but around the country, when it comes to black people and their interactions with law enforcement. And I dare say the outcome would have been different, just based on anecdotal evidence. So, again, it does make you wonder, is a black sheriff's life worth less than a white sheriff's? Is a white perpetrator's life valued more than a black perpetrator's would have been? And based on anecdotal evidence in this country, I'd say I'd say, unfortunately, black people are on the losing end in both cases.
Yeah, I would say that that's definitely true. And and I brought it up, but I said, I felt like the gun laws gave the jury, or certain members of the jury, an out. It gave them an escape hatch here to say that this poor kid felt, he feared for his life. He feared for his life. He didn't know that was the sheriff, even though numerous people said the sheriff identified himself multiple times in the parking lot.
Right.
And I just to me it relied on such leaps of logic to believe that this guy, this 6'6" sheriff, was choking this 5'7", 130-pound kid in the parking lot. And this kid was able to get away without a scratch on him. Was able to reach back behind his seat, pull out a gun, and shoot the sheriff. You know what I mean?
Seems implausible. Yeah.
And so, listen, I understand you've got in certain cases, you have to, the people are going to tell you they didn't do it, but you've got to take the evidence and take a preponderance of the evidence and determine whether or not you believe that beyond a reasonable doubt, what took place in that parking lot. And I think, I think we probably have a pretty good idea of what took place in that parking lot, I would say. And I don't know, man. It just is, it's astounding to me that we have gotten to the point now with our gun laws and things that we have encouraged people to believe that this is the way to behave, that this is the way to handle disputes, that this is the way that people should be interacting with one another. I mean, it's just, it's very depressing. It really, really is very, very depressing. Speaking of which, our right-wing nut is very depressing this week. Because I've got high hopes for our right-wing nut, of being able to restore sanity to things, in this state.
It's not looking good, Josh. It's not looking good.
I know. And, it just, God almighty. I mean, sometimes, man, you just want to pull your hair out, and I don't even have any, and it just, it's Katie Britt, and, it's related to her comments about, Democrats, turning up the tone, needing to tone down the rhetoric and not calling somebody a fascist, and how that is really affecting the way the public views things. What are you talking about? You've never mentioned a word about this other guy. This other guy that's running around here.
That's just crazy. I mean, she, Katie Britt, Senator Britt, at times comes across as though she could be the reasonable, sensible successor to the reasonable, sensible tenure of Richard Shelby.
Yes.
And then there are other times when it seems like she's vying to become the next Mo Brooks or somebody. I mean, my God have mercy. I just don't understand it. Why she feels like she has to say things like this that are clearly nonsensical. How in the world can you say that calling Donald Trump a fascist is despicable and not say a word about the many, 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 many despicable things Trump has said since 2016 or whenever he started running for the presidency? Despicable things he said and done. Give me a freaking break.
I like war heroes who weren't captured.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, oh my God, mercy.
I mean, that he said that
need prayer
about a Republican.
Yes.
About a Republican. About a Republican
a war hero.
A POW, a Vietnam POW. One of the more respected people. You want to talk about respect and behavior and how to handle things. The contest between John McCain and Barack Obama, and the way that those two men handled that contest, and the way those two men treated each other. You know, the very viral moment of John McCain taking the microphone away from the lady at one of his rallies or at town halls and saying, no, he's a good and decent family man who we just have disagreements with. Yeah. And Obama saying very similar things continuously about John McCain. Yeah. That is what you're looking for. And that's what everybody would like to go back to. And the person who destroyed that, absolutely destroyed that, is the person she's sticking up for right now. Yeah. And the hypocrisy and the stupidity of that is unmatched. And so, you know, against all my wishes and dreams. Yeah. Got to name Katie Britt the right one. So, well, you know, listen, by this time next week, we'll maybe have a president-elect, and we'll, you know, be welcoming in the first female president in our history. And so, but we shall see. All right, we're going to slide out. We'll be back, you know, next week. Until then, y'all be safe out there.